Greetings, everyone. Joining me on today's Next Gen North podcast is Dylan Bennett. Dylan is a teacher, a gamer, and a tech entrepreneur, and is the CEO of Darwin's The Array, the newest cutting-edge technology hub and education centre. Dylan walks me through The Array, what it is, and what it can offer young people looking to get into the tech sector. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Well, Dylan, thanks for joining us on the Next Gen North podcast. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Now, coincidentally, we actually graduated from the same high school, 2005, I believe now.
Class of 05.
Yeah. What have you been doing with yourself the last 20 years?
Oh, this and that, just chilling out, playing some video games.
Yeah?
I assume that's why you brought me on, because I'm really good gaming.
Esports pro?
Yeah, yeah, not quite. Not quite. I'm pretty bad, despite how often I play them. Graduated from Darwin High School in 05, and then graduated from Charlestown University. I went and followed my parents' footsteps and became a teacher. Taught for a few years here. Taught back at Darwin High School, where we graduated from. Because
Centre of the universe.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what happens. Then I kind of took off and had my time outside of Australia for a little bit. So I went and lived in Indonesia, and I kind of worked and taught. So I taught in Spain for a few years. I taught in China for a few years. And then I lived in Melbourne, and I went and taught at RMIT University for a few years. And then COVID lockdowns happened, and, you come back to the nest. And that's what I did in 2020, where I had my existential crisis like the world did at that time. And I went away from academia, and I went into starting my own video game studio. So I kicked off Larrikin Interactive around 2020, 2021, taught myself how to code.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, representing.
Give it a plug, mate. Give it a plug.
Yeah. Well, that was the first formed studio here in the Northern Territory at the time. The territory didn't have any pipelines for video games. It didn't really recognize video games within the Screen Territory remit of funding. And so I spent a good part of my time in 2020 and 2021 lobbying on behalf of video games to make sure that we had a pipeline of cash for the talent that was here. And at the same time started developing our own video game. Started with the Think Desert Race game, which is on the App Store. And that was a way of demonstrating that you could turn something that's really important to the Northern Territory and promoting on a totally different medium, that is video games, which got funding through the the Business Innovation Program. Mm-hmm. And great. It also catalysed the proper funding that we have now through Screen Territory. So if you want to make a video game now in the Territory, you've got 3 different channels of money that you can go for. And we have a NT game designers community of about 235 people, which kind of started from zero. We have the Geek Culture Collective, which I co-founded, which runs Tropicon. So we have this resurgence or recognition of the geek, use that term loosely, whether you're into medieval role-playing or video games or esports or whatever. Mm-hmm. We have this... we have now a recognition of how many people there are who love to do that kind of stuff, and events that support them, like Tropicon and Geek Fest out in Palmerston. And now we have a thriving, for Darwin, obviously, per capita video game industry, where we're on par with Tasmania, who's had an 8-year head start over us, and we're hitting up there with Western Australia, which is obviously much bigger than us.
Wow. So
in that journey, So I went into a joint venture with Paspaley, and we co-created The Array. So we went and applied for one of the challenges, which was to create a local esports tech hub in the Northern Territory. And our proposal won. And that proposal was a not-for-profit tech hub called The Array, which is part school, part co-working space, part esports. Mm-hmm. And that's, I guess, what's been going on since high school.
Yep. Great. So The Array. So tell us a bit more about that. Has there established infrastructure there? Are you running programs? Sort of what is The Array? Do you have a sort of a goal or a vision ultimately with that?
Yep. So The Array came about because in the Northern Territory, as the rest of Australia, but particularly bad in the Northern Territory, you've got a lot of jobs who need a baseline IT literacy to be good at. Mm-hmm. And that baseline is getting higher and higher every day. You know, things like ChatGPT and AI are going to just accelerate that even more of what you need to know to be effective inside the workplace, whether you're agriculture or you're a public servant in one of the departments. It doesn't really matter. And our pipeline to skill up people is lagging really far behind. You know, at the moment we're finding, and this is coming through ACS's Digital Pulse reports and reports that the government are putting out about our tech pipeline. It's unfortunately not there yet. So we're not really giving people who are growing up in the Northern Territory the tech skills that they need to enter into the workforce and be effective straight away, and they're having to learn most of it on the job.
Mm-hmm.
So it came about because of that. And so our solution to kind of fix that as the problem is to create a school, to create a co-working space, and also to advocate on behalf of esports, because esports is a bit of the weird one for a lot of people because they understand education, like we can teach tech skills, which is what we do.
Yep.
And we can create a co-working space, which is pretty sensible because it means a lot of the emerging tech companies then can co-create in the same location, or that serendipitous, you know, behavior that where the best ideas form can happen in the eating room of a co-working space.
Yep.
The relationships can be built there. That makes sense. Esports sometimes throws people because not a lot of people know what esports is actually.
Yep.
But esports is pretty big in the world, you know, outside of Australia, particularly with our neighbours in Asia. Esports is in the Commonwealth Games and the Olympics. Wow. So we're talking something that's like past tense. So it's already recognised as a viable sport. And that's normally the first, what? Like,
yeah.
But it's just people playing video games.
Yeah.
And so first there's a conversation about actually esports as a viable sport, and athletes are athletes and they train in a similar way to athletes train. And there's exactly the same kind of model that sports follow is an esports model as well. And so what does that mean for us? Well, actually, we know that 83% of Australians play video games.
That high?
So that was the last report at the end of last year.
Amazing.
More people play video games than not. It is the preferred medium of digital entertainment. You know, the stat that always gets used is the market of a video game, of the global video game industry is the music industry plus the film industry together multiplied by 2. So in terms of
the potential is massive.
It's huge.
Yep.
And so the question is, like, why aren't we using video games as a mechanism to like upskill people or to engage with people? Why is it still kept under the rug and in some parts of the world considered a niche hobby? And it's really not that anymore. So
it's broken through to like the mainstream.
Totally mainstream. If anyone's watching Fallout on Amazon Prime at the moment, you know, there's a lot of crossovers now that have originated in video games that are coming into television. Dota,
those sort of things.
Totally.
Yeah. My partner watched Dota, so
Yep.
I'm like, I used to play that game.
Yep.
Years and years ago now.
And it's still around.
Yeah, amazing.
You know, like generations of people,
Sure.
like parents now playing with their kids in that same kind of game, the same way you'd play cricket or you'd play squash or something, you know, like you'd have your children immersed in the same kind of culture you enjoy.
And you'd be passing, you know, your tricks and tips and stuff down to them, just like your dad teaching you how to bowl a leggy or something like that. Yeah.
Yep. Had a mid lane or something.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
So I think, so esports is the other thing that we're doing because we know that there's heaps of people out there who are playing video games and they don't want to go and play basketball, particularly if it's really hot here in the territory.
Darwin build-up will,
man,
it's a bit of a disincentive there, isn't it?
Totally.
Yeah.
So we can get them in.
So, you know, you say that there was a skills gap or an educational gap. So the traditional forms, if I was interested in, you know, games development or anything of that nature, was it more traditional institutions that I would have had to go through? Would I like TAFE or university, or would it have been something that I'd actually had to learn myself, you know, coding online? Or like, what was sort of the original or the traditional ways of getting into games development that you're hoping, you know, to plug a gap there?
Yep.
You know, what problem are you guys solving?
Yeah, so I think for us, what we found, like myself as a self-made programmer. So during COVID lockdowns, I went on YouTube and I subscribed and paid for courses online that are completely non-accredited, and took me from not understanding how to code to being able to code now within Unity, C#.
Yep.
And that's all non-accredited training that is really valuable and has upskilled me. And that's really the direction that we're heading in a big way. So not necessarily focusing on accreditation. We think the universities are there for that. You know, they are doing your degrees in computer science. And unfortunately, CDU is, as of right now, not doing any video game stuff, but hopefully that will change soon. Because typically, to answer your question, you would go to a university who would teach you either computer science, and you would try and use what you learned to build video games. But not just programming. You could also go into an art degree and go into video games. You can go into music degree and go into video games. You can go into a narrative focused arts degree and go into video games. You know, like there's a lot of disciplines within video games beyond programming. And only relatively recently have universities started to create video game specific undergrad courses that you can do, which focus basically on the video games as the outcome. But I would say that the majority of people are, particularly those who aren't coming out of high school, are learning themselves online in unaccredited ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're trying to do here is to create a community of learners and teachers. So the adult short course is a great example of something that happens in Darwin and fills a gap. So we have had CDU for a long time doing what it does, but the adult short course has found its niche by offering unaccredited courses in pottery and whatever, all the really interesting, traditionally creative stuff.
Yep.
What they aren't able to do because of the hardware requirements is service the same kind of creativity but within technology.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, the courses that we're running now, we have our first course starts today, and it's a 2D art. And so the person who's running this is Sky. So she was one of our first hires at Larrikin Interactive, came straight out of university, Bachelor of Arts degree, learned a lot of the video game specific stuff with us, but had a really good background in arts and drawing and that kind of thing. And she's now running a 6-week course that's not accredited, but it teaches everything that she's learnt while making a video game for the last 2 years, plus all of her knowledge in creating art on the iPad or whatever, to the people who are coming. You know, and we can provide the iPads, we can provide the space, and we can make sure that teachers are getting paid for their time properly, and the students have access to not just the teacher, but also the expertise behind the array as well, if they need to. So same function as the adult short courses, but just for technology.
Mm-hmm.
It's art, we've got 3D art, we've got drones, we've got social media for business, you know, like it's not just video games.
So are these, you know, you're talking about adult short courses, are these, so what age groups are we talking about? Is the array sort of focused on the youth per se, or is it more, you know, if you've just got a keen interest in technology, you know, you might have an interest in video games, you might want to be an entrepreneurial figure, you know, tech startup type. You know, is there pathways for all ages, or is it just restricted to younger people?
So we have a focus on 15 to 25-year-olds. So that's one of our focuses.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not to say that there are people outside of that age group. So what we've done is we've created 2 streams. We've got a 3:30 to 5:30 class, which is aimed at and suggested to high school or middle school. You know, like it's about the time they leave school, the parents are still working, it can be a really nice environment for them to be there, not feel like the pressure of having adults in the room, and learn something interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have a 6 o'clock to an 8 o'clock stream. And again, it's not like exclusive in that a 15-year-old couldn't join that 8 o'clock, 6 to 8.
Sure.
But it's just a better time normally for adults to come in.
Yep.
And they don't have to be 25 or less. You know, they can be whatever age they need to be if it's of interest to them.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a focus on 15 to 25, but we're not exclusatory to any age group. And that's not to say, for example, on the weekends we run Code Club, which is like 6 to 13 years old or something, like really young coders.
Yep.
And that's great. That's one of our most popular courses the moment.
Yep. So what's Code Club? What does that actually involve?
So Code Club is a worldwide program that runs, and I can't remember who backs it exactly, and I'm probably going to regret that, but they're a worldwide organization where you create these chapters, I guess, in each of the different cities around the world. There's been one in Palmerston that's been running for a long time. The City of Palmerston Library has been great at giving them a space to run. And we were approached by them to say, like, there isn't a space that exists for us yet in the city. Could we run at the Array? It's a free program, so it's completely free for everyone to attend. And it gives the early programmers, like your primary school, middle school programmer, your really introduction into programming. So you're looking at like Scratch development, moving on into Python, and starting to build your own websites and things like that through HTML and CSS.
Yep.
And it runs term by term. So you kind of start at 0, and then you can go through the ranks of Code Club.
There's like a hierarchy, is there?
Yeah, like basically you start at the first lesson, and then you go all the way into being able to create your own website and that kind of stuff. And that's kind of we couldn't say yes fast enough to that, because that's exactly what we want to be doing.
Yep.
It's free. It's foundational. So a lot of the problems we're finding is that people are not getting those foundational skills and like how to think about programming. So when they hit later on in life, they have to learn right back at the beginning.
Yep.
And it's done with a credible partner.
Okay. So when you say Code Club is like an international program, how does that sort of connect with the Array? Do you have instructors that are kind of trained appropriately to the Code Club or something like that?
Yep.
And then that's delivered by your guys to your clients? Is that sort of how it works?
Yeah. So it'll be different depending on who we partner with. So Code Club is an example. Yes, they have their own system for making sure that their teachers and their volunteers and stuff are at the standard that they need for Code Club. And when we talk with them about what it might look like at the Array, we just ask what that system is, and we have a look. And we, for example, have also partnered with 42 Adelaide. So 42 schools started in Paris. There's 50 something around the world at the moment. They're one of the best tech schools in the world. They're also free, and they're an alternative pathway with a really high number of females and underrepresented groups. So that's just a really short spiel into them. We absolutely love what they're doing down in Adelaide. That's the only campus at the moment in Australia, and the Northern Territory is a second. So we're able to run their programs here in the Northern Territory, and that's another partner who we would sit down and understand how they work and what their mechanisms are to make sure that everyone is trained properly, and what their pedagogy is, and how we can incorporate it. And if the fit fits, amazing. We'll bring them in and we'll start running. For our people like Sky and people who are teaching the drones and the video game stuff, you don't have to be a qualified teacher. You just need to kind of be passionate, the same as Adult Short Course. You need to be passionate, and in a conversation with us, we'll understand to what extent you understand teaching. And if it happens to be that you are really passionate and knowledgeable about your subject matter, but you've never taught a day in your life, well, that's our job.
Right.
So that's my background and the background of the team.
Sure.
So we understand learning, teaching and learning, and so we can help that person turn their knowledge into something that's really engaging. So we sit in on the classes, we give them feedback. There's a mentorship aspect there with the teachers so that they can be better at what they do, because ultimately them teaching better helps the Array and then helps themselves. So that's kind of how we make sure that everything is a good quality.
Yep. Have you found that, natural teachers are sort of more conducive to this sort of role, or is it, you can sort of take anyone that's raw in the teaching aspect of it and, shape them into a decent instructor? Have you found it?
I think, because I guess I'll speak more like the experiences I've had before the Array. Teaching takes time to learn how to do, and I think there are things that you can do that you don't think about, which is easy to teach a teacher how to do, but then it's a skill that just needs practice. So you can find that there are people out there who are easy to pick up skills of teaching. They might be a bit more, or they might have had a bit more experience with it in the past, and once we know what their skill level is, we'll kind of back off a little bit more. But if you're super raw, never taught before, then we'll work more closely with you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because you also don't want a teacher to feel uncomfortable when they're in the front of it. But this is the best class to teach in because everyone wants to be there.
Yeah. What sort of pathways will the array offer in terms of career progression? You know, like if you're a young kid that just loves tech sort of stuff, you know, what sort of vocations could they find themselves in? You know, after a stint at the array, or you know, maybe 10 years after you know, joining the array.
Yeah. Well, I think overall, what we would like is that if you start off with us in Code Club, for example, and you're just kind of learning the fundamentals, we'll have something for you at every stage of your journey. Like if you're a foundational young person, then we should have a program that's fit for you. And if you're someone who's thinking of changing careers, ideally we have something to help you do that as well, like if you're in your 30s or 40s. As to where you could end up, I think the benefit of tech is it's like teaching literacy, you know, basic numeracy and literacy. It's one of those core skills that it doesn't actually, where the possibilities are quite broad. And what I mean by that is, man, totally.
Yep.
Like, so one of the things that's working really effectively at the moment with disengaged youth and youth who are potentially dropping out of high school and they're not quite sure why they're there, and what we're finding it's really effective is that if they enjoy playing video games, we can kind of harness that enjoyment and the motivation that they have to play video games, and we can teach them how to code their own video game or create the art for their own video game or the music or whatever what they like. And video game is the carrot that has, you know, kept them motivated to learn the skill. But as soon as you know C#, you don't need to make video games. You know, as soon as you know the programming language, you don't need to necessarily use that skill for video games. You can go into an IT job and say, I know how to code. You know, and they'll more readily pick you up. Yeah. So video games tends to be just the carrot that brings people in. But the skills are not specific to video games. You know, it can be, you know, whatever.
Do you have any events on the go at the moment? What sort of events have you had in the past? You know, how have they gone? Are they a good sort of another sort of carrot to get people in the door and you know, maybe dip the toe in the water that haven't done that type of thing before?
Yeah, we had our opening event, which was madness, and it was great. It hadn't been done before, not in a territory, not in Australia. So it got bigger than Ben-Hur really quickly, but we're super glad that we did it. We ran a international esports competition between the Philippines and Australia.
Wow.
So it was the Tekken 8, which is one of the most popular games in the Philippines. And that conversation came about like in the perfect array style. So we had a conversation with a couple of members of the fighting game community and the FAANT, Filipino Association of the Northern Territory, just over lunch. What if we, like, obviously there's a really big following of Tekken in the Philippines, and there's a really big local Filipino community who are really passionate about that video game.
Okay.
What if we did something to celebrate that? And so we did a joint effort between the array and FAANT, and we basically flew in the best Tekken players around the world, 3 from the Philippines because they're the top in the world, and 2 from Australia. And we held this international esports competition between countries, and it was a 3 versus 3. 3 of the Filipino players versus 2 of the world's best from Australia. And then we had a wild card option where we held a preliminary match for anyone in the Northern Territory to win and be the best in the Northern Territory, and they would go into the Australian team. So we had Nesta, who is like a reigning champion within this particular esport, and he won.
Is that his handle or is that his actual name?
No, his name is Nesta. Ness.
Is he the local Nesta?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with him.
Yeah, so Ness won that by a long shot. He won the Northern Territory wildcard preliminary match. And then he represented his country. So he got a jersey and he played along the best in Australia, the athletes of Australia who did this full time and fly around the world. He was on the stage with them competing against literally the top 5 in the world, the best players. It's like playing against your Michael Jordans and your, you know, the players who are getting paid to play and identified as athletes.
So it's just an amazing sort of platform for little old Darwin, you know, to get on the world stage.
Totally. And we held the exhibition match live and streamed at the Vic Arcade.
Yeah.
You know, so we completely redefined what the Vic Arcade has been used for. We brought in producers and a whole sort of streaming equipment so that we could run it live. And we basically made it free.
Yep.
Made sure that anyone who wanted to come and experience what esports was about could. You know, and I think the energy on that night was awesome.
Yeah.
It was bloody hot.
Did you get a crowd there?
Yeah, so we had like 150 people turn up.
Oh wow, great!
Which filled out the Vic Arcade, man. Like that was.
Is that in the undercover sort of foyer area, or was it? Yeah.
Yeah, the undercover.
Yeah, great.
So we had the up in, if you remember the space, there's like a balcony up there. That was where the athletes competed. So we had the grandstand up there, and then we had a little stadium seating at the bottom, the projected onto the slats on the other side. The Pokerlicious and the Meow Waffy places stayed open for that event because obviously extra business and their fellow nerds. So that was something that they were really happy to be a part of as well.
Yeah. So it's a bit of local stimulus as well for the for the businesses in the city. That's
totally
great.
Yeah, it brings people in when they wouldn't normally be in on a Thursday night.
Yeah.
And so those kind of events we want to do more of.
Okay.
So we're sponsoring the amateur, I shouldn't say amateur, but it's like the league in esports that's happening at the moment. So that's something that's been run for quite a few years now. But you can get involved as a player.
Yep.
You know, you can sign up yourself or with a team, and you can see how good you are compared to the other people in the NT. We're also looking at starting a high school league, so having it so that the high schools can compete against one another the same way they would with basketball. So we're working with the high schools so they know better how to do that and deliver that, because then we're starting to create a pipeline. So you've got people in high school who already know how to play, but they want to be a good athlete and recognized for it, being recognized for it, going into the next step, the league that's being run, then potentially connecting into our bigger stuff. So if we do run, when we run other events like that, then maybe they compete and they win and they get to play on the big stage. So they're kind of like esports-centric events.
Yep. Great. So how did the selection for the location end up at the old Vic Hotel? Because, I mean, I'm sure we've both got, you know,
some memories
foggy memories of the Vic now, you know, dancing on the tables and all that sort of stuff. That's, you know, days long gone by. But what sort of was the impetus for the Vic? Because, you know, it's a lot of people have tried to, you know, get the Vic restarted as a bar and a pub hotel thing, and haven't seemed to have made it work. I don't know if it's that part of the city, you know, the mall, just it's struggling a little bit. You know what I mean? Totally. So what sort of was the rationale behind choosing that location?
I mean, one of the reasons was because, as you said, we need more reasons in general to come into the city. For the people who are retail in the city, you know, that's their lifeblood. Making sure that there's foot traffic and there's a reason to be in activities to do. There's a lot of really good stuff that, you know, Activate Darwin does and NTMEC do to try and to bring people in and re-engage basically with the CBD, the heart of Darwin. And I agree, there's still a fair bit of work to do so that we can have it as somewhere that's got a high foot traffic for everyone.
Yep.
So one of the reasons was to basically be another piece in that puzzle, to be centered in the heart of Darwin, so that there's another reason for people to come in to learn, to co-work, you know, or to have these events. And then it's all about making sure you have a good relationship with the people who own the building. And so we have a fantastic relationship with Paspaley, you know, and that making sure that both of our visions are right and for the right reasons is a super important thing when you're starting a not-for-profit. You know, like it's a really tricky thing to do for a long time, you know, and there's no ownership over a thing where you can then, you know, sell and get dividends later on.
Yep.
It's a really primarily altruistic, something for the community. And so finding the right partner who believes in that vision as much as we did, was crucial. You know, so Paspaley did. they happen to own the Vic.
Yep.
You know, that's their building. And they are looking for the right reasons to reactivate the Vic. You know, they're looking for the right partner and making sure that it kind of aligns with the visions that they have internally. And so this one did, you know, like this was an opportunity that they really wanted to get behind. And so, yeah, like in the end, it's still, we're still, although we've gone in with Adventure together, it's still a commercial relationship and we still have that relationship, which is really important. You know, nothing lives forever unless, you know, it has a good business case behind it. Yep. But they've, what they've done has been incredible for the array and also what they've done to the Vic to make it fit for purpose.
Yep. Because I'm sure a tech hub's probably a little less destructive than a pub, because I believe the Vic is heritage listed. Like it's a beautiful old building.
Yep.
I can't imagine, you know, it's got the you know, massive bandwidth you know, lines connecting in and out of it, but it is. It's like 1890 it was built, first stone building in the Northern Territory, one of the oldest buildings in the Northern Territory, heritage listed, you know, like it's iconic for full Darwin. You know, this place was built before the mall, you know, the mall kind of built around it. Yeah. So it was a shame for so long to see it empty, you know, someone who's grown up here in Darwin, you know. And at the same time, there's this sense of responsibility now to like actually do right by reimagining it. Yep. So I think, you know, I think there's always a space for something like a bistro, pub or something for people to eat and spend time there. Yep. But definitely the areas that are upstairs, we'd love to see transformed to accommodate more of an educational, co-working space. Yep. You know. Are there developments going on in the territory that could, you know, the array could leverage off? You know, I know there's a data center being constructed. You know, I think it's in Darwin. Yep. Are there any other developments like that, or that you'd like to see in the pipeline that could really, you know, you could piggyback on to really sort of make this thing all it could be? Yep. Man, there are so many. There's so many but a lot of them are like project-based outcomes that need a whole bunch of talent to run. Right. So you've got the data center. That's what you're building now. Totally. You've got the data center. Yeah. Awesome. Need some tech literate people to be in there. You've got the sun cable, you know, which is feeding power. You need to be tech literate, you know, to be running that. So it'd be nice if the talent came from the Northern Territory. You've got NASA and you've got the space stuff that we're going really big on in the territory. Yep. That's going to need some tech literacy pipelines to make sure there's people in there. You've got the super fast data cable from Singapore to Darwin, which is creating like almost a very minimal latency between us and Southeast Asia. So we'll technically be the fastest in Australia for us to connect with Southeast Asia. Wow. Which is hard to demonstrate the value of that apart from data centers and data transfers and things like that, but is fantastic for esports, which means if we want to hold an actual competitive competition that needs a small latency, you can't do it from Melbourne, you can't do it from Sydney, you can't do it from Darwin because of that particular cable. So you don't need to travel to Asia to compete against the world's best. You could come to Darwin and so that's something that we can develop for. So basically it seems like, and I'm not obviously across any of these developments, I don't have any say in what gets developed or not, but I do keep looking at the announcements of all of these amazing tech projects. And I guess a lot of them was before the array was set up and thinking, but how are we going to run them? Like where is the talent coming from? Yep. Obviously we've got an amazing pipeline of overseas and interstate talent coming into the territory, like we've always done that in NT. It'd be nice if we also had somewhere here, based here, who can upskill people to come grow up here and then work here in those kind of jobs as well. So is that something that you think the government could do more, or like who are the players in this space that could, you know, throw a bit of money around or you know, invest in certain things to get that moving? I think like if you look at the ways that it normally happens, the primary school, middle school, high school, university, go into a job tends to be your traditional pathway talent pipeline. And
what do we know? We know that the universities at the moment are struggling to keep up with the pace of technology. They're doing what they can, but there's kind of an inertia within any large organization.
Sure. Is that due to AI mainly, or is that other things in your opinion?
No, I think universities, funnily enough, the academics I know are jumping on AI pretty quickly, but it takes time for them to go through the policies and procedures around how AI can be used.
Yep.
We're seeing that within classrooms with the first reaction is always cancel and prohibit.
Yep.
And then work out how it can be integrated. Mm-hmm. And it just takes time. And in that time, we're talking years.
Yep.
So in that time, your year 10 student will have graduated and not have good exposure to AI, let's say for this example. Or at university, you might be starting your bachelor's degree and AI might not be properly introduced officially until you finish your bachelor's degree. Mm. That's kind of the pace at which these large organizations are moving. And fair enough, that's their incumbents and that's kind of how it has been for a long time. Which is why the gap is being filled by these smaller unaccredited courses.
So they're nimble and they can just pivot when they have to. And
totally.
Just jump in and out of things as the market desires, I guess.
Totally.
Yep.
We can be, we, for example, as the Array, can be completely market-led by that. We find someone who's passionate about the particular thing and we advertise their courses, and if there's enough people who pay for that particular course or who enter that particular course if it's free, there's market demand. And we can do that super quick. That means we should always be at the front foot of whatever technology is coming out, which means if NASA decide that they need a particular thing for their pipeline, we can look at how we can integrate that. If they've got someone already there who wants to teach it, man, it's as easy as like having a conversation and setting up a curriculum and delivering it. So I think in terms of like what can the government do? Well, I think, having worked within universities, I kind of get that they are stuck between a rock and a hard space. It's really hard for them to actually deliver content that's immediately relevant all the time because the process is so long.
Sure.
And it's one of the reasons why I left academia. I didn't want to be in that world anymore. In terms of government funding particular programs, I guess we are seed funded from the government. So that's something, they issued a challenge for how to solve for this problem. And we answered the challenge with our solution.
Right.
And I guess they believed in it enough that they've seed funded it. So it's not, unfortunately, ongoing funding forever, but it is enough to open the doors and to get feet underneath us.
Yep.
And I think it's because when you talk about the Northern Territory government, we have such a small population, and it can be really hard for these kinds of programs to be financially viable long term, as we see with people starting out amazing ideas, and we just don't have the foot traffic to keep them. Every time something closes, my heart breaks a little bit more. In Darwin, the jump 360 or whatever that was, when that kind of closed down, the trampoline place, I was like, oh man.
Yeah.
Like in so many other cities, that model works fine.
Yep.
But
it's got the critical mass of people and
yep.
Appropriately skilled workers that can
Yep. And we just struggle to get that foot traffic a lot of the time here. And so what does that mean for the NT government, which is something they're completely aware about? Like, this is not a new problem for the territory. Like, when we were growing up, it was also an issue. We had that massive boom during Impex.
Boom bust cycle, baby. That's,
Totally. So
it's the $1 million question, isn't it? How can you sort of solve that? And I think something like the Array that's, going to be providing sort of ongoing training and job opportunities is goes some way to reducing those peaks and troughs that we experience, particularly up here in the north.
I hope so. That is one of the reasons why we put it forward, because we wanted to soften the gap between boom bust a little bit.
Yep.
What that means, though, is that at the end of the day, we might not fill our classroom with as many students as we would if we run this model, exact same model down south.
Yep.
The demand is still there for this tech literacy, obviously. We have a gap there. But percentage of people who can sign up for it is the same percentage of people who can sign up in a city with order of magnitude larger population. So it's really good when the Northern Territory government understands that and subsidises or backs or supports businesses to run, even when the free market might not necessarily allow it to run. And they do in a lot of different ways. But
yeah. Well, I've got no more questions. Is there anything you feel like you've missed that you want to let us know about?
So I think part of the success of the array is going to be down to the community also leaning into it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because we've set it up in such a way where we don't necessarily want to be the owners of content. We don't necessarily want to be creating content and selling it to people ourselves as the array. In our first preference will be to deliver programs in partnership with people who are already interested in delivering those kinds of programs. If we can help it, you know, we can bring our expertise.
So as more of a facilitator.
Yeah, like,
Yep.
you know, we want to be always listening to the community. And if we have someone, what I'm saying is, if you're out there and you're thinking, man, I'd really love to run a course that is X and it has to do with technology,
Mm-hmm.
or I'd really love to learn this bit about technology and nowhere else does it right now in the NT, or I'd really love to be around other people who are like-minded, and we won't know what that is unless you come and talk to us. So I think the thing that I'd like to ask is that if that's you, then come and say hello.
Yep.
And come and tell us your idea. It's literally how the Filipino Australia idea kicked off,
Right.
you know, which turned into this bigger than Ben-Hur event, which we were really happy to support. But it wouldn't have happened at all if we hadn't had that conversation at the very beginning. So that's my ask, is to, the array kind of exists as long as there are people out there who are keen and committed to kind of lean into it.
Yep.
So yeah, please do that.
So what is the best way for everyone to get involved? Is it just show up at the array at the old Vic Hotel, or is it
Yep.
you know is there a website you'd like to
Yep.
promote? You know, what's the best way for someone to get involved in this?
So we have a website, thearray.gg. So the GG is a real thing, and people who don't understand esports, who have never played video games competitively, are not sure what GG means, but in esports, that is a way of saying good game when you
Right.
finish a game. And so the array,
Sportsmanship.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So we kind of, so that's the URL, thearray.gg.
Yep.
And we have a contact us form. If you get into contact and shoot us your idea or your request, we're pretty good at replying. You know, we're a team of 3 at the moment and hopefully growing soon. Otherwise, we're hosting a whole bunch of free events, you know, which is something that we'd like to do ongoing. As long as we have partners to help us deliver those free events, then you lose nothing by coming and saying hello. We want to be a home for different meetup groups. So we're currently a home for the GCC. We're currently a home for the NT Game Designers meetup. You know, we'll provide the space for you to host your meetings, you know, your whatever your association might be. Come down and ask us if we can do that for you. And then, yeah, then you can find us on LinkedIn if you needed to. Like, you can find me on LinkedIn. I don't personally tend to use a lot of the other social media very well.
Yep.
To my detriment, I think, probably. But
we can put an overlay of all that sort of stuff if you want to send that through. You know,
Be
just
awesome.
to get people involved, because you know it'd be great for Darwin to see something like this really take off and you know give younger people in particular more opportunities that are sort of seem to be lacking at the moment. So
yeah, no, I appreciate that. This is great what you guys are doing.
Oh, well, it was a fascinating insight into what you guys have got going on. So yeah, thanks for joining us, Dylan.
No worries.
Appreciate
Thank
it,
you.
mate.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.